Imagine sitting down at a fancy, high-end restaurant, expecting a night of fine dining, only to have the waiter treat you with complete disrespect. Well, that's exactly what happened when an arrogant waiter insulted an elderly man in front of everyone. The man, dressed casually and seemingly just another customer, had a run-in with the server who, clearly thinking he was above him, made some hurtful remarks. Little did the waiter know, this wasn't just any old man. He was the owner of the entire restaurant chain. How could he have missed that? The tension in the air was thick, and what happened next left everyone in shock. Was this the end for the waiter's career, or was there something bigger in play? Stick around to see what unfolds as the tables turn in the most unexpected way. The elderly man had arrived at the restaurant alone, as he often did. He wasn't interested in the attention or the luxury that came with the place, he just loved the food. But that evening, as he sat quietly at his table, it became clear that the young waiter wasn't in the mood to treat all customers the same. Maybe it was the man's simple attire. He wasn't wearing anything flashy like most of the other guests. Or maybe the waiter just had a bad attitude. Whatever it was, he couldn't resist making snide comments about the man's age and appearance. At one point, he even rolled his eyes when the man asked for a small change in the dish. But what the waiter didn't know was that the elderly man had been quietly observing the situation, and his patience was wearing thin. The waiter's smugness only grew as he turned to serve other tea. The waiter walked away. Still unaware of the gravity of his actions, the elderly man sat back in his chair, staring at the menu he hadn't even opened. His mind wasn't on the food anymore. He had seen people like this waiter before, young, overconfident, too quick to judge based on appearances. He had spent his life in the restaurant business and had learned long ago that respect was key. Every customer deserved it, regardless of their status. But this waiter, he had crossed a line. Meanwhile, a couple dining at a nearby table had noticed the interaction and whispered to each other. They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Wasn't this a place known for its luxury? Was it common to treat guests like that? The couple's discomfort grew as the waiter continued to serve other tables, completely oblivious to the storm he had caused. In the kitchen, the head chef, a longtime employee of the restaurant, overheard the tension and exchanged glances with his colleagues. They all knew the elderly man. He was a regular, but more importantly, he was known for his calm demeanor. They hadn't seen him react like this before. Was this the moment things would change for the waiter? The waiter, still in his own world, made his way back to the elderly man's table, ready to check on him. But something in the air had shifted. The staff could feel it. It wasn't just any complaint now. It felt like a wreck. The waiter finally returned to the elderly man's table. A forced smile plastered across his face as he asked, "Everything to your liking, sir?" His voice was tight, like he was trying to play nice, but the tension between them was palpable. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly lifted his eyes from the menu and looked the waiter directly in the eye, his expression unreadable. The air between them felt thick, like something was about to snap. The waiter, not sensing the weight of the moment, nervously adjusted his apron. "Is there something wrong, sir?" he asked again, a bit too loudly, drawing the attention of a few nearby diners. A hush seemed to fall over the restaurant, and for a second, everything felt suspended in time. The elderly man's calm voice broke the silence. "Tell me," he began slowly, his words carrying more weight than expected, "how long have you been working here?" The waiter, a little caught off guard, blinked. "I've been with the restaurant for about 6 months, he answered, his eyes darting nervously. The man nodded thoughtfully, still staring at him. 6 months, and in all that time, you've never bothered to learn who owns the restaurant? The waiter's brow furrowed, a hint of confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean? Of course I know who the owner is." The elderly man didn't break his gaze. "Do you really? Or are you just too focused on your own little world to notice?" The tension in the room thickened. The nearby diners, now fully aware of the awkward conversation unfolding, exchanged glances, whispers barely audible. The waiter's heart began to race. Was this some kind of test? What was the old man getting at? Before he could respond, a voice rang out from the back of the restaurant. The head chef appeared at the doorway, eyes fixed firmly on the waiter. "You might want to take a seat," the chef said, his tone more serious than the waiter had ever heard. The waiter's blood ran cold. There was something about the way the chef was looking at him, something that sent a shiver down his spine. The room, already tense, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment when everything would come crashing down. Koning was coming. Unaware of the storm brewing right behind him. The chef's sudden appearance seemed to freeze the room. The waiter felt a chill run through him, his pulse quickening as the chef took slow steps toward the table. The elderly man, who had been silently observing the scene, finally spoke again, his voice calm but piercing. "You know, it's funny. You look so sure of yourself, acting like you were in charge here. But you don't have a clue about what goes on behind the scenes, do you?" His words hung in the air like a dare. The waiter's confusion deepened. What was the man getting at? His mind raced, trying to piece together any hint of what was happening. Was this a prank? Was the old man just playing some strange game? He had no idea, but his instincts told him he was in serious trouble. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, the chef interrupted. "He doesn't know," the chef said, his voice low but heavy with meaning. "He hasn't figured it out yet." The waiter's eyes darted between the two men. "Figured what out?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. The chef shot the elderly man a quick glance before turning back to the waiter. "You see," he started, his words deliberate, "this isn't just any customer. This is the owner. The real owner of this entire chain of restaurants." A gasp rippled through the room as the realization hit. The waiter's face turned pale, his hands trembling as he took a step back. The elderly man, still sitting calmly at the table, seemed to enjoy watching the truth settle in. But the shock didn't end there. The chef wasn't finished. And the owner? He's not just here as a regular guest tonight. He paused for a beat, letting the weight of the words sink in. He's been coming here for weeks, just to watch how you treat the customers. And from what I've seen, you failed every test. The waiter's stomach twisted as the full gravity of the situation dawned on him. This wasn't just about one bad interaction. This was about his entire approach to the job, everything he had done wrong since he started. The old man had been watching, silently judging every action, every decision. The elderly man finally stood up from his seat, his expression unreadable. "I don't tolerate disrespect in my restaurants," he said quietly. "Not from staff, not from customers, and certainly not from anyone who thinks they can act above the rules." The room was now dead silent, the tension almost suffocating. The waiter stood frozen, his mind racing. What would happen next? Was this the end of his career? Or was there more to this story that he didn't understand yet? The room remained frozen, every eye trained on the elderly man as he took a step toward the waiter. The chef's words hung heavy in the air. The waiter's face was drained of color, his mind spinning, but the man's eyes never wavered from his. It felt like time had slowed down, like every second dragged on with unbearable tension. I didn't know," the waiter stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard, his mind racing for any excuse, any way out of this nightmare. He had made a mistake, a huge mistake, but what now? Was he going to lose his job, his reputation? All of it was on the line. The elderly man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood there, studying the waiter with a quiet intensity. The room held its breath, waiting for what would come next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke again. "I'll tell you what's going to happen next," he said, his voice still calm, but there was something else in it now. A hint of something softer. "You're not fired, not yet." The waiter blinked, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You're not going to fire me?" The man shook his head slowly. "No, but I'm going to give you a choice. I want to see if you've learned anything, if you have any real respect for this job, for the people who come here. You're going to spend the next week." The waiter stood still, the weight of the decision pressing on him. He had never expected this kind of outcome. After all that had happened, he thought he was done for. But instead, the man was offering him a chance, a second chance. But just as the waiter was about to thank him, the elderly man added one last thing. "There's one more condition," he said, his tone shifting again, sharp and sudden. "You'll also have to serve *me* tonight. Personally, the same way you would treat any other customer." The waiter's stomach dropped. The tension returned. The old man was testing him, pushing him to the very limit. But there was no escaping it now.